So the first speaker of this session is a PhD student of the Dr. Maja Mataric, and his name is Christopher Birmingham, and he will give us his recent work, and his speech is entitled "Multi-Party Human-Robot Interaction: Methods for Facilitating Social Support." So you can start whenever you are ready.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. It is an honor to speak in front of you guys. I am so happy to share the work that I've been doing over the course of my PhD. It's a little bit different from, I think, a lot of the work in this that we are dealing with multiple people rather than multiple robots. But I hope that each of you will find something interesting and relevant in this research. So to begin, the work that I'm presenting here is computational methods for the facilitation of social support. And the primary contributions of this work are methods for measuring social support, including modeling empathy, disclosure, and trust, as well as methods for modeling group turn dynamics, including active speaker detection and turn-taking prediction. And finally, I've been developing an integrated social facilitator framework of elicitation and role modeling for autonomous support group facilitation. And just to give you a visual of this, we have social facilitation, which is led through social support. But underlying both of these, of course, is the turn dynamics, which enable robot participation through active speaker detection and turn-taking prediction. Now, social support refers to acts that respond to others' needs and communicate caring. We have categories of social support, including informational, instrumental, emotional, network, and esteem support, no problem. One common form of social support is empathy in response to disclosure, and that is the type of social support that I'll be describing and working with mostly today. Now, social support can be found anywhere, but is often a core component of support groups, which is the domain in which I work. Let's see. All right, support groups are structured environments in which members meet to share their common problems or challenges, often with the help of a facilitator. And these groups provide emotional and moral support, as well as a sense of community. And they have several outcomes, including reducing stress, overcoming isolation, building social and support networks, as well as enhanced coping and feelings of hope and control. Now, there exists a real untapped potential for socially assistive robots, which I'll refer to as SAR, to facilitate and improve social interaction among situated groups of individuals by facilitating social support. And just to give you the context here, this is a subset of human-robot interaction, a further subset of socially assistive robotics, and we're really focusing in my research on the multi-party aspect. But we're working on developing multi-party methods for social support. So how can we encourage people to support one another? So social interaction in group settings is challenging for SAR. And this is for many reasons, but primarily because it requires accurately perceiving individual affect, understanding group dynamics, and providing a framework for socially appropriate action. And so due to these challenges, there's really been very little prior work. And you can see here some of the slightly amusing illustrations of how this can be challenging with perceiving affect, understanding people who talk over one another, and acting socially appropriately has been in the news, or inappropriately rather, has been in the news for some time now. Now, guided by these challenges, this research really is motivated by the following questions. What is an appropriate model of social support in group interactions? How can a robot understand group speech dynamics to fluently participate in social groups? And how can a robot facilitate social support in those groups? And the computational methods that we're developing here are, as I mentioned earlier, methods for measuring social support, methods for modeling group turn dynamics, and an integrated social facilitator framework. This is just to remind you of what we're doing here. All right, so support groups are effective when group members give and receive support. And this happens when someone makes a disclosure and another person responds with empathy. And you can see here how that leads to an increase in trust and a decrease in stress and anxiety, as well as improved social support across all group members. And this can happen at any point in an interaction with any group member. And so we model this with a robot as, again, having somebody make a disclosure and respond with empathy. And that is our core model of how we're attempting to facilitate this social support in the support group. Additionally, in order to fluently participate in social groups, it's necessary to understand who is talking and who will speak next. So that is the challenge of active speaker detection, who is currently speaking, as well as turn-taking prediction, who is going to speak next. And of course, throughout my PhD, we've developed methods for active speaker detection and turn-taking prediction, which I will go into in just a moment. So facilitators provide leadership and bolster affect exploration, which are two key components of being a social support facilitator, through two key methods. One is role modeling behavior, which is when the facilitator acts as a member of the group. And the other is directing or eliciting group member behavior, which is when the facilitator can ask group members to either share a disclosure or provide support. Now, when acting as a role model, the facilitator is directly giving or receiving support for group members. And I just want to dive in here and really illustrate how that works. So the facilitator can respond directly to individual group members. When a group member shares, the facilitator can give support directly, or the facilitator can even make a disclosure and have the robot, or sorry, excuse me, have the group member respond to that and have the facilitator receive the support. In contrast here, when we have directing or eliciting group behavior, the facilitator is asking group members to share a disclosure or provide support. And here we can see how the facilitator is creating the support between the different group members. And as an example here, we have the facilitator directing disclosure with group members responding, and the facilitator eliciting support from other group members to that the group member who made that disclosure. And so we have built a computational model of role modeling and eliciting and directing, which we're currently exploring. And together, all of these models really come together to provide the core components for a SAR social support facilitator. Now, to dive a little bit into the individual work here, we started with an academic support group where we were working on the computational model of social support. And we've seen that past work has shown success in reading and affecting group dynamics, but that not much work had been done to utilize group facilitation and to measure how that facilitation was working in terms of the trust between the group members. So we recruited students to take part in a support group for academic stress. We did this right before finals. These were USC students led by a Wizard of Oz controlled robot. And we measured trust before and after, which was primarily a measure that we were interested in, but we also collected all of the data to build computational models for the robot to do autonomous facilitation as part of this early work. And we found that trust increased both in the group members and in the robot from before to after. We developed a custom measure, which we found was unifactorial, meaning that we essentially had a measure of generalized trust. You can see here some of the setup for how the data collection happened. So from this work, we saw that qualitative results indicated participants engaged and empathized, they increased in trust, and that we had this dyadic trust scale that was validated. And finally, we also had a sensitivity-based interaction framework where the robot was making disclosures and leading with questions of increasing sensitivity in order to lead and facilitate this support group. Moving on to part of the turn dynamics section. Here we have active speaker detection on situated data sets. So prior methods had been used, primarily audio only, video only, audio visual, but no prior methods had really made use of the situated nature of the interaction, most focused on individuals. So we used the visual attention of the group to improve the active speaker detection on 2 data sets. The first data set was the robot facilitated support group, which I just described. That was 27 sessions of about 20 minutes each. And then the second was a focus of visual attention data set, which had 15 interactions and was also recorded about 30 minutes each. And so we first evaluated state-of-the-art models for active speaker detection, and we found that they do perform well in data set dependent tasks, but do not transfer well to new contexts. So within a given context, within a given data set, that can work relatively well. But when you try and have a model that's trained on one data set, it really doesn't transfer well even to a relatively similar but different data set. And so we bracketed, to explore this, we bracketed the head post range, and we found that the state-of-the-art methods really vary across different head post ranges. So as somebody is looking to the right or to the left, the accuracy of the model really changes. So we wanted to do something that would be independent of that, which we use, to do so, we used features from other group members. And so the features that we used were the visual attention features developed by my collaborator. And so we extracted the head pose of all of the group members across the interaction. And we used those features in both continuous and binary fashion to basically look at where the rest of the group was paying attention to as a method for determining who the active speaker who the active speaker was. And so the full pipeline combines some traditional methods with these new pairwise visual attention features. I don't have time to go in depth into the model here, but we combined them with either an unweighted average, weighted average, or multiplication to look at those different. And we found that when you combine those features, you do much better even across all head pose ranges. Even though there's some slight variance, you can see how drastically that improves the performance and makes it more consistent across all head poses. And so, yes, as I said, we analyzed the failure conditions and we proposed and evaluated a method for addressing the shortcomings of some of the state-of-the-art methods for active speaker detection here. Additionally, we applied this method to turn-taking prediction as part of a grand challenge. So this was a new grand challenge where it was predicting based off of, or excuse me, prior work had been using video, audio, and text-based features for turn-taking prediction. This is relatively well established. And despite the fact that eye gaze is a well-established feature for coordinating turn-taking, no prior work had really utilized the eye behavior of the group member. So again, as we were talking about before, using the group visual attention as part of predicting the turn-taking. And so just to describe the challenge, we have an observation window of 10 seconds, and we're attempting to predict who's going to be the speaker at the 11th second. So 1 second into the future here. And this was a custom data set that the challenge provided, which they allowed a training set of 22 sessions and a test set of 6 held out sessions. So again, we're dealing with this transfer context where we're not able to see the people who we're actually going to be testing on. And here's a little video or a visual of what the sample frames looked like, as well as what we were able to use in terms of calibrating the sensors from the challenge website. Similar to the past work, we incorporated group visual attention as a leading indicator of speech activity. So where people are looking indicates who is going to be talking next. And we use this visual attention in combination with the perfect match algorithm to predict the speech activity in the future. Our method plays first, very exciting, setting state of the art on this challenge test set. And we can see here that the unweighted average recall was much better compared to the baseline as well as the competition. So just to wrap up here, we have a novel dataset agnostic method for turn-taking prediction, and we achieve state of the art on this turn-taking prediction grand challenge. Moving on here, we're another piece of work that we have been working on is the perception of empathetic robots. Again, going back to our model of social support. So prior work on empathy in social agents has really focused on two key modes: the agent as the target of the human's empathy, as well as the human as the target of the agent's empathy. But what we're interested in here is exploring perceptions from a third party of how the interaction between an agent and a robot, or between a person and a robot goes. And in particularly, we wanted to look at cognitive empathy and affective empathy to understand user perceptions of the two main types of empathy that we have dealt with here. And so this work examines how the two main types of empathy were perceived when displayed by a robot. And this is just a visual of what our study flow was, but our study was done on Amazon Mechanical Turk. We had videos of a robot displaying empathy towards an actor, and we did a within subject design counterbalanced by condition. We used a standard robots perceived empathy scale, as well as a custom belief scale that we developed. And we recorded these prior attitudes towards robots through the NARS measure. I'm running a little bit short on time, so I'm not actually going to play through a full video here, but we found that, or we used basically a participant making a disclosure, as in, I feel, excuse me, as the participant made a disclosure, I feel X because of Y, and then the robot responded with either a affective or cognitive empathetic response. And so in the cognitive response, the robot indicated that it heard and understood, and whereas in the affective response, the robot indicated that it shared the emotion. And we hypothesized that participants would rate cognitive over affective empathy, as well as that greater negative attitudes towards robots. So more negative attitudes towards robots would be rating cognitive greater than affective for both our empathy scale as well as the measured belief in the interaction. What we found, though, was that participants rated affective empathy higher. So our first hypothesis was not supported, but that the negative attitudes towards robots was correlated with empathy and belief ratings. So H2A was supported, H2B was not supported, just because it was not significant, even though it was correlated. And so here we just have some of those results. Moving on, just to wrap up here, this was a novel study of user perceptions of empathy, where we found that participants rated affective over cognitive empathy, and that participant belief was correlated with empathy, and participants with negative attitudes rated the cognitive condition higher than the affective condition. And I'll just linger on this slide for a moment just to point out that the reason we hypothesized that participants would rate cognitive empathy over affective empathy was because the robot obviously cannot actually feel emotions. And in the affective condition, the robot is ascribing that it has or shares in the emotion, whereas in the cognitive condition, it's really a more clinical understanding. And we expected that participants would prefer, given that a robot is not actively or actually able to feel emotion, that it would prefer the cognitive over the affective. However, that was not the case, primarily because participants generally had positive views of the robot. So they had low negative attitudes towards robot scores. And to wrap up here, the last bit of work that I want to describe is the role model and elicitation model that we're using for SAR support group facilitation. And so there has been plenty of past work that has shown robot mediation can affect group dynamics as well as read group dynamics, but no prior work has really tested how different facilitation methods might work in different contexts here. And so this is an experiment that we're going to be running soon, but the SAR facilitator is going to make use of role modeling, eliciting, or both to encourage disclosure and empathy in a group. And this is a 2x2 action space where the robot can either make a disclosure action or an empathetic action. And they can use either the role modeling method or the directing and eliciting method, which we covered earlier, how the role modeling method is, again, between the robot and the group members, whereas the eliciting and directing method is about creating that social support between the group members. So this work, as I said, is going to happen soon. We are going to test the use of a SAR facilitator in real live support groups. And this is going to be a qualitative within subject study of autonomous cancer support group facilitation, where we're going to compare both of the methods as well as a combination of the two methods. And this early work is really about collecting participant feedback. So this is going to be a pilot study. And we're going to evaluate how well the robot performs primarily by asking participants about their perceptions. And the level of autonomy is still under development. There will be some combination of autonomous responses with Wizard of Oz control, depending on the level that we can get to before we need to run the study. But we're going to continue to develop future more autonomous methods. And just a diagram of what this method looks like. We have individual speakers being recorded on individual cameras with individual microphones. And we are using our turn model to evaluate whether or not the robot should continue listening or speak. And if the robot is going to speak, it's going to, based on the prior, look at the prior utterance, the last thing that was said, to decide whether or not it should do a disclosure action or an empathy action. And again, whether or not that disclosure action or empathy action is going to be either role modeling or eliciting / directing, depends on the condition that the robot is in. And just to plug the platform that we have developed as part of the Interaction Lab, we'll be doing this all on Harmony, which is a ROS-based platform for interaction development. And I've run a little bit over time, but I just want to say thank you to my advisor and all of my collaborators, the National Science Foundation for funding this work, the USC School of Viterbi and Engineering, and as well as the rest of the Interaction Lab. And I will leave it here on my contributions. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for a very interesting talk. We are now open for the questions. So if you have any question, please come to the mic. Or there are so many Zoom attendees. So someone who want to ask, please post your question on the Slido. So actually, I have one question. So if my understanding correct, you conducted many analysis to what kind of, for example, the who are friendly to the robot, the aggressive attitude is better, or who are not, the cognitive attitude is better. Then I think by using such kind of analysis, is it possible? Are there any work that you utilize that analyze data to change the robot behavior? I mean, okay, he's very friendly to me, so a bit aggressive, or are there any research?
So if I understood your question correctly, you're asking about some of the data that we've collected and how that informs
Yes.
the robot's behavior here.
Yeah, dynamically change.
Dynamically change.
Yeah.
So We have not done real-time dynamic changes for within the interaction. One of the things that I kind of briefly touched on was how the perceptions of empathy change based on the prior attitudes towards robots. So if someone has a negative attitudes towards a robot, they tend to prefer a more cognitive empathetic response versus if they have a less negative attitude, they prefer a more affective response. So one of the things that we're looking at doing is using the basically a prior measure of their attitudes towards robots to determine what type of empathy might be most effective.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have a chat.
Thank you for your talk. Very interesting. It was very, very interesting. Because obviously, because robots can't, feel emotion. How people still liked the system. I think, my question goes down to trust. So you can imagine in these kind of support groups, people are making very personal disclosures. Robots don't always do the right thing. They notoriously go wrong. Do you think that trust would be broken if the robot did the wrong thing? And do you have any plans to mitigate that?
Yes, thank you for your question. That is absolutely true. Things do go wrong. And one of the things that we're looking at studying as part of this pilot is participant reactions to when the robot inevitably does something incorrect and how the participants view that. One of the ways in which we try and mitigate that is by basically through the introduction to the robot, setting the expectations at a lower level, announcing, that they have trouble understanding what people are saying or may say the wrong thing at the wrong time. If you allow people to form their own expectations, it can often be quite high in terms of what they think the robot can and can't understand. So basically, one of the ways to deal with that is just to, in the beginning, say, hey, sometimes I don't always understand what you're saying. Sometimes I say the wrong thing, and that tends to smooth over some of the problems there.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So since the time is up, so we go to the next speaker. So thank you for your great talk.